For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan and welcome to another edition of the Gist. This evening we are looking at Air India's Mammoth order for 500 jets from Boeing and Airbus. So a mix of wide-body jets and a mix of single-aisle, narrow-body jets. And this perhaps the first time ever we have come across a deal of this kind. And there are reports going around that Indigo may be in line for a similar order. So clearly the stakes are high for the Indian aviation market and of course for Airbus and Boeing. So we're going to try and break this down, figure out what exactly it means for India, for the world, and of course for the Indian passenger. I have with me Amit Paranjpe. He's an aerospace watcher, a tech entrepreneur based in Pune. Amit, welcome. Glad to have you.
Hi, thanks for inviting me, Surya. It's great to join you to discuss this interesting deal.
Amit, this is huge, this order for 500 jets. I mean, first time ever we've done this.
Yeah, it's massive, and I think it's obviously momentous for India, but it's momentous for the other countries involved as well, which is the US and EU with Airbus. And so it's not just the aircraft makers, but as you know, one of the most costly components of an aircraft is the engine. So it's the engine makers like the GEs, the CFMs, the Rolls-Royce. They are also getting huge business as part of this. And yes, this is unprecedented. I think this is the single largest aviation deal anywhere in the world. The previous records, I was just looking at it over the last 10 years. Indigo did something around 400, but those were all narrow-bodied aircraft. And American Airlines did something similar, 400 or 450 or something like that a few years back. But this 470 number is by far the largest deal ever done in the world. And also it has a good component of wide-bodied aircraft as well, which, as you know, are significantly more expensive than the smaller single-aisle aircraft. So yes, it is historic, definitely.
And we will buy so many aircraft. I mean, the market is so big.
Market is definitely big, as you must have heard. Various Indian leaders, including our Prime Minister, have talked about India becoming the third largest aviation market. And we are definitely heading in that direction. So the potential is huge. Today, we are already the third largest domestic passenger market, though we are quite far behind in the international market. But that's where we are catching up very fast. And it's quite likely that by end of this decade, we will be the third largest overall market. Now, whenever we talk about this market size, we talk about two or three different dimensions. So there is the domestic versus international component. There is the number of passengers versus the dollar value. And but basically, by most of these metrics, we should be number 3 in the world by end of this decade. So there's a huge market. Air India is sitting on an old fleet, which definitely needs an upgrade, as many people who have traveled on Air India will attest to. And if you look at the Indian domestic market share, today, Indigo is the undisputed leader. They have more than 55% of the market share. So there is a strong case to be made for a strong second competitor. And Air India, which today is sub 10%, aspires to get to 30% in the next few years per their plans. So the market is big, and the opportunity for Air India is definitely big in the domestic sector, and of course in the international sector, which we can talk about a little later.
Where is the money for all this coming from? Who will fund this?
So I think it will, I'm not aware of the technical details, but usually, this is a combination of, funds put by the airline, by short-term loans, by long-term loans. And as you know, I mean, these deals are structured such that the payments are due over a long period of time. So the payments, the last aircraft will probably take 8 to 10 years. So the payments will also be spread out. The other thing I'll highlight here is there are headline numbers floating around of the deal. value, but usually those are based on the sticker price of these aircrafts. Now, in reality, for such large deals, a big discounting usually happens. So I think the price, actual price may be a little less than some of the numbers that you're seeing in the media. But yes, it will be quite a big financing package. I'm sure Tata Sons is looking at it very strategically, as they are probably going to be one of the key decision makers in this deal, standing behind Air India.
Mm-hmm. So, Amit, just for the information of the lay viewer, how much would an A350 cost? And how much would a narrow-bodied Boeing, maybe your 777?
Again, the prices vary significantly based on the discounting and other options. But my understanding is a wide-bodied aircraft like a A350 or a 777 will cost hundreds of millions of dollars, could be $400-500 million as well. A narrow-bodied would typically be a third or a fourth of that in terms of its costing. So these are very, very expensive machines. And as I said, a good chunk of this, I don't know the exact percentage, but my guess is could be up to a fourth of it could be the cost of the engines, which is why we are constantly hearing the names of GE, CFM, and Rolls-Royce as key partners in this team.
Amit, our aviation sector, the point is, are we able to leverage a deal of this kind? Can we use it to build some kind of an industry here? Do you see any evidence of that?
I think we are taking some steps in that direction. Various statements have been made by the key leaders in that area. But I think we need to do more, and it will be interesting to observe how things shape up in the next 8 years, next 7 years of this decade. There is a huge opportunity for setting up what I call as MRO basis, just a maintenance repair overall basis. And that is obviously given. The other thing is, like we have done for the defense sector, where we do a good amount of or some amount of localization. There is a joint venture between Tata and Airbus and Tata and Boeing. And similarly, like for example, we are doing some parts of the C-130 here. So similar structured projects hopefully should happen, if not immediately in the next 5 to 10 years, where these large aerospace majors start making some chunks of their aircraft in here. Of course, final assembly is key. That ends up happening at one place typically, or two places. But we definitely would like to see that happen, and I'm sure there are steps being taken in that, both by the private sector and by the government. Because look at, for example, look at the aircraft engines today. I mean, sitting here in Pune, I would like to add, we have a big GE factory here, which is for the past few years already making components of the aircraft engine right here. I hope that that production goes up significantly.
Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister himself had a word with President Biden, later President Macron of France. In a sense, he's putting his own reputation and, on the line there, that possibly something big has also been worked out in addition to these deals.
Yes, I think when you're talking about such a massive deal, it has a lot of geopolitical significance beyond just the commercial angle. There's huge business opportunity here. If you look at the statement by the Biden White House, they have talked about million jobs across 44 states of the U.S. Similar statement being echoed by Macron and also by the British Prime Minister, because as you know, the Airbus work is spread across multiple countries in Europe. So commercially and for the local politics of these countries, there's a huge opportunity. But even geopolitically for India, I think India is basically saying that it is definitely a key market, strategic market out there when it comes to doing these large purchases, and it's also, done a good job of basically roughly dividing the order equally between the US and the European bloc. As you see, it's 250-220 or something. It's very, very close. So I think that is also sending, some kind of a message. Of course, there are commercial implications to that as well. So I think, yes, from a strategic partnership standpoint and from a business standpoint, this is quite big, and I think this can also be an opportunity for us to push more actively in terms of trade for getting more of the aerospace industry investment back here in India from these countries, which are essentially the drivers of this industry today. Because ultimately, we should benefit both from a technology standpoint and from a trade standpoint on such a large contract. One more point I'll add. I think there was some discussion yesterday on this that not the West leaders particularly, but some of the Western commentators have always been criticizing India for the last year about India leaning too much towards Russia. And because the leaders have been very clear about this, they value India's relationship. But I think a deal like this makes it very clear to everyone on the Main Street or on the Wall Street that saying, look, India is very committed to business dealings with the West.
Amit, this point about leverage, Boeing and Airbus are the only two guys in the world who are actually building aircraft, building and designing aircraft. In that sense, they don't need to bow to anyone. They can set their own terms,
I mean, that's partially right. I think, in a sense, unfortunately for the global market, there are only two large companies out here. But airlines around the world and countries around the world, including airlines in the US and in Europe, have gotten these two to compete to at least make sure there is some good market competition out there. So I think it would be great for the industry to have more players. The reality is this is such a complex and high investment market that it has seen consolidation over the years. I mean, if you just go back about 30 years back in the US had a big second player in McDonnell Douglas, and we are not going to 98. So there has been consolidation. Lockheed, which was a player in the commercial sector till about 30, 40 years back, again got out of it and now is focusing purely on defense. So from that sense, yes, it is not ideal, but that's the reality. Now, China and Japan have started some effort to build at least narrow-bodied planes, and they have made some progress. And on the smaller planes, there is some competition with players like Embraer and Bombardier, but those are again sub 60 or sub 80 seaters. So if you want to look at the real wide-bodied planes and the mainstay 150, 200 seaters, you're right, there's no competition. So they have leverage in that sense.
So, there have been reports in the past about India building up an aerospace industry, perhaps even designing and building its own passenger aircraft. Is that, kind of up in the sky? Is it something that is realizable? Do we have the expertise?
I mean, right now it looks like far out in the future because, building a 200-seater narrow-bodied, forget a wide-bodied plane, is a very difficult task, and it's a multi-decade effort in terms of starting with the design, with the supply chain. I mean, in China and Japan, which in some sense are significantly ahead of us in manufacturing R&D, even they have been struggling for a few decades to build a plane of their own. So I think in the near term or even in the midterm, it's a little difficult to expect us to build an entire 200-seater or 400-seater plane. Of course, looking at 20 years out, anything is possible. I mean, we definitely have the expertise and the talent out here, as can be seen from our aerospace program, especially our ISRO programs, and the work we have done on defense for Tejas. So I think it's possible if we look at 2 decades out, but short term it looks quite tough. But one thing I will say is to move in that direction, we definitely need to build our domestic aerospace industry. And when we say aerospace industry, we don't have to build the final plane. But as you know, a plane has millions of components, literally, from big ones like engines to the smallest ones. So there, I think we already do good amount of that work, and that should grow. And as we discussed earlier, we should use our leverage for such big deals to get more and more of that R&D and manufacturing back here in India, because that's how we will learn this sector and be ready with a supply chain a few decades out, if and when we want to build an entire plane.
Yeah, because as you were saying, the building blocks are already there. We have a very thriving and diverse space program Then we have this homegrown Tejas and all the other capabilities that have been built up, including, frankly, the building blocks are there. Another point, the whole issue of engines, we haven't even built a scooter engine, and now we are transitioning to electrics and all that. So, in this engine area, where do you see the prospects of something coming up here?
I think that if you look at building an aircraft or designing an aircraft, I'm an aerospace enthusiast and a mechanical engineer by trade, not an aerospace engineer. But I can safely say that the most complicated and the toughest part, in some sense, in an aircraft is the modern jet engine. And it's complicated and expensive not because of its principle. Actually, it's a very, very simple principle that any high school textbook will explain. And it's actually a lot simpler than the engine in your car. Now, in spite of that, then why is it so expensive? Well, one reason why it's so expensive is because the aviation market has focused ruthlessly on efficiency for the last 30, 40, 50 years. If you look at the air tickets for, say, transatlantic travel, over the last 30, 40 years, they have nearly remained the same. So in terms of, they have gotten cheaper in terms of real money by a factor of 5 or 10 in some respects. Now, a lot of that saving has come from efficient engines. So today, a country could probably, and China and Japan have tried, I think Russia does some of it. You can build engines. That's very hard, but you can still build an engine. But building something which is efficient to compete at this scale is orders of magnitude tougher, and that is what is driving. So that's why you get into all these advanced materials and composites and very complicated designing aspects of it, and that's what has made engines more and more complicated, and they continue to evolve that way because every 5 years the airline customers come back to these engine makers asking for more and more efficiency. And I think that part is quite non-trivial, if you ask me.
You think the transition to electrics is still some way off?
I think, this is a question that has been discussed. I think even, someone had posed this question to Musk as well a few months back. I think we are making small progress in that in terms of very small aircraft, like a 8-seater or 10-seater or 15-seater. I think that is one area where we will see some progress in the next 5-10 years, even have some commercial viable alternative. But I think the larger planes, electric still looks very tough if you ask me for the next 20 years. Anything can happen beyond 20 or 30 years. But just the energy density and the efficiency to store so much energy and that just looks a little too difficult if you ask me. I think a more practical solution for these large aircraft to be carbon neutral and an area where good progress is already being made is to use bioaviation fuel or hydrogen or a combination of those. I think that is much more likely, and if the pressure on the airlines and on the countries grows more and more each year on reducing the carbon, because today aviation is already becoming one of the big carbon emitters in the world, then switch to biofuels may be a more practical short and medium term option for these airlines. I'll mention one more point since you talked about where the industry is evolving. I think one of my favorite topics, and I feel very sad about, is we don't do supersonic travel today. I think 50 years back nearly, when Concorde took its earlier flights, we had the era of supersonic, which was typically, saw Concorde was flying at twice the speed of a typical 747 or a 350 or a 787. And Concorde, as you know, commercially was not successful and it got shut down last decade or 2 decades back. So there are some small efforts going on to rebuild an economical supersonic commercial aircraft. A couple of startups are working on it. Some big airlines say they're working on it. I think that would be a lot more interesting if that happens in the next 10 years.
We've been struggling to build the Saras aircraft and all that, small ones, how far we have got on that? Because it's been going on for many years.
Yeah, I would really analyze that. I think we have made some progress, but you're right. It's been going on for many years, and I think again, that's another, I guess, separate topic for discussion. But I don't know how much of that work in future should be done with the help of private sector, as opposed to just HAL or other public sector companies doing it. I think that's a discussion that definitely needs to be had. And I think with Tata Airbus venture that is coming up for building that small aircraft, I think that is probably a good way to proceed if you want to build our own smaller aircraft as well.
Sorry, I didn't get you. Tata Airbus JV.
But there was a deal that was announced last year, right? Tata Airbus is building a small propeller aircraft, I think for I think it is for various defense applications. They're going to assemble it here in India. Again, it's a small aircraft, but it is at least going to be completely built here in India. So that's a joint venture that was announced, I think, last year.
I see.
I don't know how far that has progressed, but that will be I think that will be probably the first private sector complete aircraft JV. We have been doing a lot of aerospace parts and subcomponents, but I think that intends to build the entire small aircraft.
So last question, Amit. 10 years from now, I mean, this is very speculative. 10 years from now, what is the shape of the Indian aerospace sector that you would like to see?
I think, okay, let me answer it in two parts. One is I would like to talk about the airlines as well. I think I would like to see India or the Indian hubs like Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru become major international hubs. I think one of the things that we have, it's very sad that over the last 20, 30 years, we have lost a lot of our international traffic to the Middle East gateway. And that's because we were just not providing the adequate connections. And it's been a huge opportunity loss for us. So with a good international airline like Air India, with these modern planes, in the next 10 years, if we can bring back some of that international. And the good thing now is these modern aircrafts, 777s, the 350s, the 787s, have 15-hour, 16-hour range. So, we can go pretty much anywhere in the world from Delhi or Mumbai, by non-stop to any destination in US or in Australia or any place. So I think from the market standpoint, we are doing great domestically. We will already be in the top third with many various metrics, but I think internationally we need to get our market share back. In terms of the industry, I think I'm very optimistic about this industry. I think both driven by the space efforts of ISRO and the aerospace, both commercial as well as military. I mean, we just had Aero India last year. So this week, actually. So there is a lot of demand in India for aerospace of all types. And that is finally resulting in a good set of large companies establishing joint ventures. And whenever that happens, we have a trickle-down effect, and we see a good MSME market coming out, which are essentially part of the supply chain. So that sector is growing. And the last stage are the startups. I mean, ultimately, you need startups working in this space that are providing interesting new solutions that some of the big companies have not thought about. So again, we are seeing good progress in that area as well, especially in the space side, and you have done programs on that. On the space side, we have had few very exciting startups over the past few years supporting ISRO. So I think this is going to be one of the great industries for India over the next 10, 15 years, if you look at early 2030s, both from a demand standpoint and from the aerospace industry supply standpoint. So it should be an exciting opportunity, also a great career opportunity for budding engineers who are looking at what branches to pick. I think aerospace is now being offered in all top colleges, so that's something they can also look at.
So hopefully going forward, government will continue working with the private sector to realize this aerospace ambition, and let's keep our fingers crossed that no other pandemic develops.
Yes, of course.
Amit Paranjpe, thanks very much. Great talking to you.
Thanks, Surya. This was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you and good night.